Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm TP Shankar. We are honored to have all of you present in the hall and those participating through video link on this very important session. Now, I would request Dr. Dipankar Saharia, Senior Fellow and Senior Director, to begin the session with his welcome address. Over to you, sir. You want-
Good afternoon to all of you. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of TERI, TERI's Energy and Environment Data Diary and Yearbook. At the same time, I would like to invite our panelists today, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh. He has come. Dr. Reshmi, Mr. R.R. Reshmi, Distinguished Fellow TERI, Mr. Alok Kumar, former Secretary, Ministry of Power, Government of India, Mr. Girish P. Pradhan, former Secretary of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and former Chairperson of CERC, and Mr. Venugopal, who is joining us shortly. I would also like to welcome Mr. Ajay Shankar, Distinguished Fellow of TERI and our Director General, and all guests that has joined us today online and physically. And it is a wonderful occasion for us that we do yearly in launching of TERI, something that we have been doing for a very long time since its launch in 1986. It also is a special occasion for us because being our 50th anniversary and launching of TERI in the 50th anniversary year is a special occasion because TERI all started off in 1974 with the vision by none other than Mr. J.R.D. Tata, with the vision to do research in energy. And the most important point when you talk about energy during that time, now it's energy transition and many other things that has linked up with energy. But during that time, it was more of data, the prerequisite of anything that we start off. And data, when we say we have the past data, present data, and the future data, and how we actually use the data. We have seen one of the basic data that we have come around is the census data. How government have used the census data to plan the family, plan the economic growth, plan different policies for the social welfare. So that data is in use by the government. But if you see long back, even before Christ, the pyramids were probably made with some statistics. Everybody, many of you must have seen the pyramid in Egypt, in Cairo, near Cairo. And, those were data-driven probably, to make such structures during that time. I know statistics were definitely used. So data is not something new, it is very old. But how we are utilizing it and how best we can use this for a future development. Now we have very future, data that is, but data is still very unpredictable, although we can predict many of things. In that course, when I give an example, a very simple thing that is sports. Now, even if you see cricket, you see football, everything is data-driven. Every shot, every football kick, every saving is, I'm making a very lighter side. It's all data-driven. A goalkeeper, when he gives up the penalty during the penalty shootout during World Cup, he knows if the player would hit left or right because he has the data and he observed that how many player hits on the right side or the left side. So that is the importance of data, and especially in the energy sector, which this study covers. It's not only energy, it is environment. Everything that comes under energy and environment is covered, a prerequisite. And the reliable data that is published by us is the most important part. This has been used by the government for, having different policies being formulated from this. And we are very proud of it that, we are continuing with this launch of TERI, a flagship publication by us from 1986 onwards. And it continues, and I am very sure that with this, we are only improving the quality of data that is there, more reliable data, and also at the same time, it is that how we can rate data within from this, how we can, actually provide the best data and to our, different clients or to the government for their use. I am welcoming you all to our 50th anniversary. Our DG would speak more on, the different things that we are doing. I don't want to. Many of times it happens that I say a lot of things, and nothing is left to speak about TERI. So, thank you so much, and I would like to welcome you all to the very important, program to the launch of TERI. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your insights. Now, I would request Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, to deliver inaugural address.
Thank you, TP, and I'll like to extend my welcome to all of you. In fact, TERI is one publication which I'll say it's almost the time when I joined TERI. 86 was the first volume that came out. And for any publication, I should say to survive for 37, 38 years, that itself is a milestone. And many a times we keep on questioning ourselves, is it still relevant? And I was quite surprised because this year I got 3 WhatsApp messages asking me, has TERI been released? So which means that the government officials, they actually wait for this publication. So therefore, that in a way gives us confidence that this publication remains relevant. So Dipankar did mention about that, how we started, or the time when you are talking of 1986. That was the time it was really, really difficult to collate data because everything was so spread out. Internet was something which was not really available. Computers were not available with everyone. So therefore, publication of this kind was extremely relevant, or rather, I'll say it was more like a Bible for those who were working in the field of energy and environment. Perhaps it remains equally, if not relevant today, because today we are living in the era where collecting knowledge is far more tougher because it is getting changed every day. It's so fast. The transitions are so fast. And earlier we were talking or working more or less in silos, in the sense that we are talking about what are the energy needs. And it was largely, we were looking at coal as one of the options. How much can we meet what is going to happen to the coal reserves, how much is to be imported, and so on. Electricity, how the loads, peak load, and that kind of things. That is what we were largely discussing, how much can be made available to agriculture sector and all. But today it is that we are looking at the impact of one way form of energy over the GHG emissions as well. We are looking at that if we have to sustain this planet, how energy transition must take place, where my energies should go in terms of looking for alternatives, which are the sectors where energy demand is going to go up, and so on. And many of you might be aware that when we started, we were Tata Energy Research Institute. And we were one of the pioneering institutes which started working on renewable energy. Perhaps, again, in terms of uniqueness, we were the ones perhaps who brought sustainability in the main sphere for discussion. That development is important. It still remains very important for a country like India. We have to develop, but that development has to be sustainable. The good thing which is happening around us today is, first of all, everyone is becoming conscious of the impact of climate change. It's also that each one of us, we do realize somewhere that the present way of growth perhaps is not going to sustain us. And we are paying very heavy price for whatever, I should say, our generation has done. Because you are always worried about polluted air. You talk to anyone today, those who are in the hills, and they'll tell you, at least we have sun during the day. But in Delhi, we have no sun because of pollution. So that is the price we have paid for using energy, or the form of energy which was not clean. We are happy because as a country also, while we had very little of fossil fuels, we are blessed with plenty of sunshine, and therefore the cost of energy generation in years to come is perhaps going to be lower for India than many other countries in the West. And also, we have to develop, we talk of 2/3 of the infrastructure is yet to be built. We do talk about that as the economic status improves, the very first thing on which we end up investing is energy, whether it is for mobility or whether it's for human comfort. It is going to increase in years to come. And that is where it is extremely important for us to review what we have done in the past, the data, which, as I mentioned, we are bringing out this book year after year since 1986. So therefore, we have the past trends. We can also look into how it is changing in the recent time. And therefore, it becomes a sort of guiding document before us to look into and then proceed or plan for the future. So I won't take much time, and because we have excellent panelists who will discuss and tell us more about what is there in the publication and how it's going to help us. And welcoming you once again, and thank you. And I'm sure you are going to have very fruitful afternoon. Thank you.
May I now request Mr. Rajesh Shankar, Distinguished Fellow TERI, to address.
Dhawanji, Dipankar Saria, my friends Alok Kumar, Rashmi Saxena, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh, and all of you attending this event in person as well as online. DG mentioned that TEDI emerged in the pre-internet age, and it used to be really looked forward to because those of us who are older remember how difficult it was to get any data. Then the other transition that has happened is government was a black box. It was almost impossible for anybody to knock on the doors of a bhavan, walk in, or get any data. So much so that some of us who worked in government would also find it very difficult to find a data or an old file or an old report by an expert committee. Now, in both areas, the world has changed dramatically. As DG pointed out, I mean, in the internet, on our smartphones, so much is available. And the other thing is that government has become extraordinarily open and transparent. So a young researcher from overseas told me once that this kind of flood of government data on your ministry websites is a dream. But the other comment came was, it's very difficult to make sense out of it because there's too much and it's a bit untidy. So TEDI has been continuing and is our flagship publication. And may I make the announcement on which we agreed to? So starting this year, we hope to change the form in which TEDI appears. And this would be one of the themes in the panel discussion. So our intention now is to create the data online and make it available to the whole world, make it much more richer, user-friendly, and updated every month. So one of the questions which I would pose to all of you and your friends is that where are the data gaps and how data should be better organized to make it user-friendly. The other transition that we will make is that this annual publication would become a slightly more critical and analytical piece. So in the chapters we cover, whether it is power, whether it's building, whether it's agriculture, we take a slightly harder look on what has happened, what is happening, what is moving in the right direction, where some course correction would be desirable, or we are underperforming. So just two extreme examples. One where we can be very proud of what we have achieved and are achieving is increasing the share of renewable energy and lowering our carbon intensity. And the other end of the spectrum, where I think we're on a treadmill running and still not moving forward, is waste management, whether it is sewage or solid waste. There we are, in spite of all the effort, we have yet to make a breakthrough. So my intention is that in the coming years, we'll pose slightly tougher questions in our chapters, make it smaller, but a little more analytical. So it has, again, value for every user across the world. So with this, shall we proceed with the rest of the program? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before I invite our chapter authors to make presentation showcasing key highlights of TEDI, I would briefly explain the content of the TEDI 2020-23. TERI Energy and Environment Diary and Yearbook, shortly called its TEDI, which has been TERI's flagship publication since its inaugural edition of 1986. Over time, TEDI has become a reference document and source of comprehensive information on India, providing energy decision makers and insights essential for future planning. The continuity of information in each edition is maintained, so readers can understand and analyze the trends and patterns of change in the energy and environment sector over a period of time. The publication presents latest information on energy supply sectors, that is coal and lignite, petroleum and natural gas, power and renewable energy sources. And energy demand is another section that include agriculture, industry, transport, residential and commercial sectors up to period 2022-23. With the help of this data, the trend analysis of energy intensity for each sector can be drawn, which can further help in the comparison of energy intensity for each sector. So the state of environment, both local and global, has also been discussed with respect to air quality and pollution, solid waste management, water resource management, land and forest resource management. Also discusses various facets of climate change, topics including global and India level emissions and climate change trends over India have been discussed within this section. We now have 6 quick presentations by the chapter authors. The first presentation is on power and renewable energy combined. I would request my colleagues, Ms. Christy Anil Joseph and Ms. Kirti Sharma to come forward and make the presentation. Just in 5 minutes.
Check. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, distinguished dignitaries and my TERI colleagues. Myself, Christy, along with my colleagues, Kirti and Jinsi, would like to invite your attention to the power and renewable energy chapters in TERI 22-23. In the power chapters, the major contents covered are electricity generation, power supply position, electricity consumption, losses, cross-border electricity trade, and some of the key achievements in transmission and distribution. Similarly, the major contents in renewable energy chapter covered are solar energy, wind energy, bioenergy, small hydropower, and other sources of renewable energy. Let us take a glimpse into some highlights from both the chapters. So as of March 2023, India's total installed generating capacity stands at 416.06 gigawatts, and the mode-wise share is shown in the pie chart. As you can see, the coal-based power plants record the largest share, followed by renewable energy, hydropower plants, gas-based power plants, nuclear power plants, lignite power plants, and diesel-based power plants. It is noteworthy to note that the coal share has gone below 50%, that is 49.3%, and renewable energy sources rose to 30.1%, which was 51.1% and 27.5% during the year 21-22 respectively. This marks a change in the electricity supply mix and an increase in the share of renewable energy. The bifurcation of 125.16 gigawatt is shown on the right side, as you can see. Further, let us go to the past 10 years data on certain aspects of the Indian power sector as presented in the TERI power chapter. Figure 1 shows the growth of gross electricity generation in India mode-wise. The total electricity generated during the year 2022-23 was 1617.813 billion units. The per capita consumption was 1327 units during the year 22-23. We can see that there is a dip in the pandemic year as shown, and currently we observe a steady growth. The next figure shows India's net energy exchange with the neighboring countries. Currently, India exports electricity to Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Myanmar, and imports power from Bhutan and Nepal. The import and export of energy by India into or from these countries from the year 2013-14 to 22-23 is shown in the figure.
As mentioned earlier, the total installed capacity The total renewable energy installed capacity as of March 2023 was 125.16 gigawatt. This graph shows the top 10 states in renewable energy installation. We can see that Rajasthan has the maximum installed capacity for renewable energy at 23.4 gigawatt. This is followed by Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and others. The following graph shows the share of renewables installed in various states. From this, we can infer that most of the share of renewables is of solar power, which is maximum in Rajasthan compared to other states. This is followed by wind power, biopower, and small hydropower. We can also see that the major share of small hydropower is in Karnataka, followed by Himachal Pradesh, Maharashtra, Kerala, and others. As we wrap up, let's quickly go through some key highlights under renewable energy sources for 22-23. Accumulative rooftop solar installation capacity reached 9.3 gigawatt in the first quarter of 2023, with Gujarat having the highest cumulative rooftop installations of approximately 2.2 gigawatt. Government approved the installation of 57 solar parks with an aggregate capacity of 39.28 gigawatt. The National Bioenergy Program was notified by MNRE in November 2022. This is an umbrella scheme for 3 sub-schemes, namely the Biogas Program, the Biomass Program, and the Waste to Energy Program. The oil and gas marketing companies procured 11,227 tons of CBG during 22-23. As per the roadmap for ethanol blending in India 2022-25, 10% blending of ethanol in petrol was to be achieved by November 2022. However, this target was met 5 months before the deadline. With this achievement, we are on track to achieve the target of 20% blending by 2025-26. The total installed capacity of small hydropower was 4.9 gigawatt, and around 102 projects with a total capacity of 538 megawatt are under implementations. For more details, kindly refer to the Power and Renewable Energy chapter. Thank you everyone for your attention.
Is the presentation copied on? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The chapter 10, buildings, then the demand side, actually deals with the energy use and demand in the Indian building sector. As per International Energy Agency, has forecasted that substantial increase in Indian energy demand is going to happen in this decade, which is because of population increase, industrial growth, urbanization, and increase in the cooling demand. And buildings are one of the pivotal drivers in this growth over the time frame, and we have looked at till 2030. The graph with the bar graph shows that energy consumption over the last decade, and it has increased with a CAGR of 5.16. This is just the building energies. And within this period, the residential energy has shown a higher growth rate of 6.87 percentage. In future projections till 2030, it is expected that the residential energy usage will increase almost 5 times, while the commercial buildings energy usage will increase by 3 times. You can see in the pie chart over here that the domestic sector and the commercial sector is having a percentage of 25.8 and 8.3, totaling to around 34% as of 2022. And it is expected to increase substantially in the years to come. One of the major aspects of this increase in energy consumption is attributed to the increase in space cooling requirement. This slide shows the projection of cooling demand sector-wise. Almost 11-fold surge in building cooling demand by 2037-38 is expected compared to the baseline of 2017 and 18. In terms of building cooling energy consumption, it is likely to double in the next decade and become 4 times in the coming decade over the 2017 and 2018 baseline. Indian Cooling Action Plan actually outlines the potential of energy saving which we need to achieve to meet the targets. And almost 20% of reduction in cooling load by 2037-38 is planned to achieve through climate appropriate building envelopes. An additional 30% reduction in cooling energy is envisaged through enhancement in cooling equipment efficiencies and adoption of improved servicing, operation, and maintenance practices. We have also included what are the different government policies, initiatives, and schemes which are being there through government initiatives to meet the target which we have set for 2070 to achieve net zero emissions. And this includes a lot of things like India Cooling Action Plan is there. Then building codes and bylaws are being developed. Eco-Nivas Samhita, residential code, minimum energy performance codes, model building bylaws, energy conservation building codes are now set to be changed to energy conservation and sustainability building codes. Then there are different energy efficiency programs like Global Housing Technology Challenge is there, Market Integration Transformation Program for Energy Efficiency, Standards and Labeling, Building Materials Directory of India. There are green building rating systems are there. Including GRIHA, which is TERI's own green rating for integrated habitat assessment. And there are several awards and schemes which are there. So these have been included in the chapter. And for more details, you can go into the details of the TERI document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin. I would request Piyush.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Piyush, and I'm a research associate at the Transport and Urban Governance Division. I'll be presenting key highlights of the chapter on transportation. Okay. The chapter not only highlights key statistics related to global context, that is global transport sector. It also showcases the trends in energy consumption, GHG emissions, passenger and freight transport sector, covering road, rail, waterways, and aviation in India. So commencing with a quick recap of the global transport sector, we see that the transport sector consumed 117.5 exajoules in globally in 2022, while relying on oil products for approximately 91% of its final consumption. The sector-specific CO2 emissions from transport sector stood at 7.95 gigaton CO2 in 2022, which is 3% down as compared to 8.26 gigaton CO2 in 2019. Interestingly, emissions from road transport have increased by 11%. Emissions from shipping have increased by 16%. And emissions from rail transport have remained constant over the last decade, that is 2012 to 2022. As we delve deep into the Indian transport sector, we see that the sector contributes approximately 5% to India's GDP, majorly dominated by road sector. In 21-22, transport sector accounted for approximately 11% of India's final energy consumption. If we go deep into the fuel consumption, so from 2019-20 to 2022-23, consumption of high-speed diesel and petrol in the transport sector has increased by 4 and 16% respectively. Going to subsectors, we see that road sector has witnessed 3 times increase in passenger activity and 1.8 times increase in freight activity from 2008 to 2019-20. In railways, we see that railway sector reported 23% increase in freight traffic and 56% decrease in passenger traffic from 2019-20 to 2021-22. Aviation sector reported decrease both in domestic passenger and cargo traffic from 2019-20 to 2022-23. However, cargo handled by major and non-major ports pan-India has increased by 5.8% from 2021 to 21-22. The final slide highlights key measures that have been taken, ranging from fuel efficiency improvement to promotion of alternative fuels and promotion of electric mobility in financial year 22-23. We see that India has introduced BS6 phase 2 norms, which mandates RDE emissions testing for new vehicles. CAFE 2 norms were also mandated, which mandated OEMs to meet certain fuel efficiency standards in order to compete, and also if they're not meeting their targets, then they have to face penalties. MORTH also notified retrofitment of CNG and LPG kits in BS6 engines. We have PLI schemes to boost domestic battery manufacturing as well as component manufacturing. Then National Green Hydrogen Mission, which was also approved in January 2023, it also aligns with our LTLEDS goals. In terms of e-mobility, certain states and union territories, for example, Chandigarh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Ladakh, Manipur, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, and Uttar Pradesh have notified their specific EV policies in last year. Also, Indian Railways have taken electrification of their routes on a massive scale, which is in line with their commitment of 100% electrification by 2024. For more details, you may please refer to chapter 8 on transport. Thank you.
A very good afternoon and season's greetings to everyone present here on the occasion of launch of this event. Myself, Priyanka Vadrevu from Center for Himalayan Ecology, Water Resources Division, and I'm here to present chapter number 13 titled as Water Resources Management in TERI. So to begin with, I'll just give a brief overview of the key highlights that are mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, which talks about a few points, which are India has global almost about 4% of world's renewable water resource, which can cater up to 18% of global population, which means India has no dearth of water resource. In 2022, out of total groundwater assessment units, approximately 67% were safe and rest of the units were overexploited, semi-critical, critical or saline in nature. In 2020, out of the total sewage generated, only 28% of the actual sewage was utilized. Out of 60% of wastewater generated by industries gets treated by common effluent treatment plants, and rest of it gets discharged untreated. So moving on to per capita water availability in relation to population, a country is classified as water stressed if the availability is less than 1700 cubic meters, and it is classified as water scarce if it goes down to less than 1000 cubic meters. In 2011, we have already crossed the mark for water stressed country, and we are in stressed conditions now. Soon we are approaching towards water scarce conditions, which are supposed to touch by the mid of this century. Moving on to net irrigated area by source at country level, we had net irrigated area in 1950 about 20.8 million hectares, which was in 2021 around 77.7 million hectares. So we can see beginning from 1960, Green Revolution has aided in that, and that the groundwater resource is used a lot for irrigating the fields after that, and that has also increased the demand of groundwater resources, and the net irrigated due to net groundwater resources has increased. Coming on to the wetlands of the country, by June 2022, we had 49 wetlands which are characterized as of international importance. By November 2022, we had 75 sites under Ramsar wetlands, which is within 5 months, it has increased 18% of area in the total number of the country. Moving on to the key mitigation measures, I have listed here 16 key schemes and programs that we have in our water resource management chapter, which governs the sector. All of these were framed and brought into the action after the beginning of 21st century, which is an interesting thing to ponder upon. And majority of these are time-bound and have progressed well in achieving their desired targets. Further to all this, each has been briefly mentioned in the chapter, and interested one can have a look at the chapter. Thank you for being an attentive audience.
Thank you, Priyanka. We have two more presentations, agriculture and climate change. I request Dr. Manish Anand to come and speak.
A very good afternoon, distinguished guests and colleagues. So in the agriculture sector, my co-author is not present at the moment, so I'm also presenting on his behalf. The key areas being covered are more in terms of the energy trends and patterns, consumption of energy in the sector, as well as more in terms of what is the farm power availability and productivity in the sector, issues related to water, productivity, irrigation, and cropping pattern changes, then also trends in GHG emissions from the sector, and also related to climate change vulnerability aspects and adaptation finance. So coming back to the performance of the sector, as we all know, India is predominantly an agriculture dependent country, and it contributes around 18.6% of gross value added, with a huge dependence of population, agriculture workers on this of this sector, which is to the tune of 45.5%, with a lot of cultivators and agriculture laborers The latest PLFS data showcases it as the cultivators percentage as 77% and the remaining as the laborers. In terms of food grain production, as we all know, we have made a very good and massive increase in food grain production, starting from in 1950s, 50 million tons to the tune of around 315 million tons in the current year. And similarly, this has followed in other sectors, agriculture, allied sectors, in the horticulture sectors, for fruits and vegetable production, which over the last decade has just more in terms of doubled. Similarly, in the livestock sector, when we look at which India has the largest herd of cattle and buffaloes, the milk production is the highest. And also in terms of poultry industry, it is one of the fastest growing sector in India. In terms of energy use pattern in the agriculture sector, over a year, there has been an increase and energy has been more or less used for land preparation as well as for irrigation. So these are the two major activities in which energy is being consumed, and we have tried to collect more in terms of data and convert it into the respective energy units. And we have seen that the total commercial energy input to Indian agriculture has increased from 1496 into 10 to the power 9 megajoules to 2050 into 10 to the power 9 megajoules in 2019. So increase in over the years, over the decade. And we have also tried to look at more in terms of source-wise direct and indirect energy consumption pattern, direct being electricity and fuel, and indirect being nitrogenous and phosphorus fertilizers and pesticides. In terms of percentage, if we see the share of direct energy used in the form of electricity has increased over the years from 28.75% to 37%. And similarly, the indirect energy use in the form of fertilizers has contributed to the tune of, currently it is 60%. And so there is a decline, which is more in terms of a good indicator. Then electricity consumption in agriculture has been, as we all know, we are heavily dependent on groundwater withdrawal and all this. So irrigation demand for new varieties, and there is also a policy support in terms of subsidized electricity being provided to the sector, which has led to increase in electricity consumption in the sector. In terms of irrigation, cropping patterns, and water use efficiency, there has been an increase in the net irrigated area, and the line graph shows more in terms of an increase from 20 to 77.7 million hectares net irrigated area. And one important data here is more in terms of the huge and over dependence on increase of tube wells, which has increased from 0 to now it is more in terms of if we see around to the tune of 37 million hectares is being irrigated through tube wells. So, and this is leading a lot to more in terms of sustainability challenges in the sector. And there is a significant scope for improving this part of agriculture more in terms of increasing the water productivity in the sector. In terms of emissions, there has been an increase in the emissions in the sector, and this data shows over the years the increase, but and it accounts for 14% of the total GHG emissions in 2016, 74% been from the methane and 26% nitrous oxide emissions. And in the right, you see the major contributor being enteric fermentation, then rice cultivation and agricultural soils. In terms of climate change, vulnerability and adaptation, we all know that, and there have been estimates by ICAR that to the tune of 4 to 9% of the agriculture economy each year, there is climate change related loss to the agriculture sector, and which accounts to 1.5% of the GDP loss. And ICAR CRIDA has also come out with the vulnerability assessment of the districts, and 19% of the districts, rural districts, are highly, very high risk prone districts in terms of climate change vulnerability. So the sector also covers more in terms of the policies in the sector in the recent decades, and maybe those who are interested can take a closer look at it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present the key findings from the climate change chapter. There are two components to the climate change chapter. The first component is focused on weather pattern and climatic trends over the past years and the past decade. And the second component talks about important climate action initiatives globally and specifically in India's context. So in terms of observed climate trends, importantly, the IPCC AR6 report suggests that the extreme weather events are on a high rise and they would continue to do so. It estimates that the 1.5 degree Celsius target would be close to be crossed by mid 2030s in most of its projected scenarios. In terms of climatic trends in India, the annual mean temperature in 2022 was about 0.51 degrees Celsius above the 1981 to 2010 average, indicating that 2022 was the fifth hottest year since 1901. The annual rainfall was 108% over the long period average, which is fairly within the normal rainfall range. However, precipitation has largely become lesser in terms of days and rising in terms of extremity, indicating sign of erratic weather patterns. This slide largely talks about cyclonic disturbances, and as evident from the graph, most of the cyclonic disturbances over the last year have occurred in the Bay of Bengal with three major cyclonic depressions. Two of these were classified as severe cyclonic storms, and one was classified as a cyclonic storm. In terms of emission trends, importantly, India overtook EU to become the third highest emitter of of carbon dioxide, just behind China and USA. However, it is important to note that emissions in India are much lower in terms of per capita average. The Indian per capita average for emissions is about 1.8 tons CO2 lower than the global average. This slide also provides a split of sectoral emissions, with the energy and agricultural sector taking the dominant share of CO2 emissions. Followingly, the chapter talks about climate initiatives, particularly the national plans and schemes undertaken in India to combat climate change. This includes a brief mention of LTLEDs as well as India's NDC targets. These largely include the target to reach net zero economy by 2070 and emission intensity reduction of GDP levels by 35% from the 2005 levels, achievement of a 40% renewable energy installed capacity by 2030, and about 2.5 to 3 billion carbon sink creation through forestry by 2030. India also submitted its updated progress on the NDC targets to the UNFCCC in 2022. India will achieve about 45% emission intensity reduction of GDP by 2030, which is higher than the earlier intended goal. And 50% of the installed power installation through renewables has also been achieved, and mission life, importantly for sustainable living, has been introduced. An important part of India's initiatives over the last year was its presidency for the G20. India enlisted several priorities for its G20 presidency. It included green development, climate finance, and mission life, inclusive and resilient growth, accelerated progress on SDGs, technological transformation and digital infrastructure, multilateral institutions, and gender inclusive development. Importantly, the declaration stated that developing nations will need about USD 5.9 trillion just to meet their short-term NDC targets. And the main focus of the presidency remained over climate financing and global cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I would like to extend a hearty greeting to this momentous occasion, the TEDI 22-23 book launch. So let's get this very important book launch underway. May I request our dignitaries to come forward for the release of TEDI 22-23. Please come. Please come. Please. Thank you very much. So now over to the panel. So next session, the panel discussion will start soon. Sir, Venugopal, please. SP sir, please come. I would request Mr. R.R. Reshmi, Distinguished Fellow and Program Director, please start the session, please. Sir.
I thought there was a setting a theme. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And let's begin this. We have an excellent panel here and very senior and experts from the field and very knowledgeable people. So we hope we will be able to generate some good discussion points relating to the work of TEDI. And DG was pointing out that TEDI over the last 37 years has done tremendous work, and it has been seen by the government and other stakeholders as an important source of information on including sustainability parameters, which is the key focus as far as we are concerned. The panel today consists of Dr. Pradeep Ghosh, and you all know him. He doesn't need a introduction. Mr. Alok Kumar, the former Secretary, Ministry of Power. Mr. Jayant Sinha, Senior Principal Consultant, Energy Transition of Capgemini, India Private Limited. Capgemini or Capgemini, depending on how you like to address him. Mr. Venugopal Mochkur, Senior Specialist and Director of the Niti Aayog. So, welcome once again to this discussion. The three key points which appeared to me when the chapters were being introduced, one was as Mr. Ajay Shankar was pointing out, the format of the data, and then the kind of data gaps that we may be wanting to look at. The first is the format. Do we need to change the format? Is the current form adequate? What is it that we need to capture fully to be able to convey the data to those who want to use it? Considering the sustainability framework in view. Second was, of course, the different sources of the data, different sources. And the world has changed very largely in the last 38 years since TEDI started publishing itself. So the sources have changed vastly. Considering these changes, how do we reconcile the data? How do we capture the data fully and make it presentable and intelligible and also acceptable? Third was, of course, the future areas of analysis, as you were saying, sir. We would like to make it more analytical. So how the chapters can be adapted or modified or improved to be able to capture the nuances and considering the challenges that we have. So let me begin with Dr. Ghosh. And then what I would like to do is, since we have about an hour, these three questions or any other questions that panelists may like to address in 3 rounds. So let me begin with the form first. How do you see this, the TEDI in its present form? Do you see it adequate, or in what manner would you like it to change?
Thank you, Rashmi. And let me begin by expressing my hearty congratulations to the authors of TEDI, who have slaved day and night for more than a year. And we know how hard people work in TEDI, and they are among the people who have worked the hardest in TEDI. Over the years, we have seen increase in scope of the presentation in TEDI, the fields covered, as well as the depth of coverage. Now, let me say that it's not the structure of the report that is so material, but the content. And of course, as Mr. Ajay Shankar mentioned, that in future we will have, we expect to have greater analytical content. What I would also like to see are in respect of particular energy technologies, uh, you know, uh, you know, a detailing of the upfront costs, the capex, as well as the O&M costs, because this would be of great value to energy sector modelers. I would also like to see that since the IMD has data over more than a century, that to look at least key regions of the country and to see how major climate parameters have changed over whatever period is feasible. Look at climate data, for example, in terms of temperature, in terms of precipitation, in terms of extreme weather events, and also that in terms of extreme weather events, we probably have good data on the extent of morbidity and mortality and how these have changed over the years. Probably the surprising thing might be that while the data on disasters or climate extreme events show an increasing trend, but there's a sharp decline in the mortality and morbidity which results from the extreme climate events. This data will also enable us to assess for these key regions the increase or decrease in some cases of vulnerability. So I would stop here at this point, and back to you, Rashmi.
Thank you for this very pointed suggestion, sir, about inclusion of climate trends in the maybe one of the chapters which deals with climate change. This is very significant there. This similar trend analysis perhaps would be relevant in other chapters as well. So, Mr. Alok Kumar, how do you see this? You have had the opportunity to go through TEDI.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I glanced through it. So, first of all, it's always a pleasure to come to TERI to meet stalwarts like Pradipto Ghosh and Ajay Shankar ji, and it's a very good occasion. I am very happy to be here this afternoon. Second, whenever we talk of energy, we have to always look at IA's India Energy Outlook or some other source which is not our own. So it is always a pleasure to have some compilation which has been done in India and for India. And it's, I think, very nice feeling to look at the publication. In the initial remark, we were told that energy was important, data was important in those days. I feel it is all the more important even now. And I can appreciate the efforts by TERI that especially energy data, things are getting very difficult, very challenging because things are changing very fast. If you look at the data being available in media, in websites, in reports, and on WhatsApp groups. And secondly, you are having so many new dimensions being added every year, like electric vehicles and all. So it's really challenging to keep track and have a credible, good publication. So my compliments to TERI for this effort. A few suggestions. There's some first small thing is that some harmonization is required. It's not a criticism, but like in the presentation you saw, renewable energy did not include large hydro. Whereas now for the last several years in India also, and world over, renewable energy includes large hydro. Why should we understate our achievements? So when you compare it, it is compared with some other publications and some government statistics. So a quick run for some harmonization in what is the international format would be helpful. Number two, I feel there is one area of data in energy sector in which we are very deficient. That I realized we were doing the energy data management unit, the new unit which was set up in B, and tried to do the data for both supply side and demand side. Niti Aayog was also with us. Supply side is fairly easy. It is reported by IA also and several ministries. Our ministries are organized supply side wise, coal, petrol, electricity, and all. But the consumption side is very difficult. So what we lack is the consumption side, both segment wise and fuel wise, which is not available. If we have to do any meaningful analysis of the impact of policies or the gap in policies, what we intend to do, and if we want to measure the impact of policies, in fact, we require the data on consumption side, not only for industries in energy. What is the breakup of industry which is being consumed, like imported coal or domestic coal or petcoke or LPG or PNG? That data, industry, and then you go to the steel and all, is not available. So I will encourage and I will suggest TERI to look at that point, because as we say in energy transition, we talk so much about coal that we forget most of the many other more important things in India. The demand side management and the energy efficiency is the most important and low hanging fruit for India. But we have done a lot. It is being recognized in the world also. But I feel out of potential, we have done about only 50%. If you compare the minimum energy performance standards of any major appliance, be it air conditioner or be it industrial motor, we are not among the best. We are even in some areas below the median. So we have to push very hard the compilation of data and its analysis implication in the energy consumption. Demand side management is very important. And there are two suggestions about the format. First, in every chapter, if we can pick up one very relevant current topic for analysis and add maybe 4 or 5 pages. TERI has a wealth of the talent and the research. It will add a lot of value, because if you see any good international publication, they take 1 or 2 topical relevant data topic, and then they analyze and throw it. For example, the impact of free power on consumptions. Is good data available in Punjab? In what fashion residential consumption of electricity has increased after the introduction of free power for the homes? So those type of data will be very useful for policy advocacy also, and that will be one example. So we can have many examples. And one last suggestion from my side on this in this round is the gap we should bring out for the sake of to the government and the ministries. What is a data gap which is being felt by researchers that government can take up in their future surveys or compilations? So if some suggestion comes from institution like TERI, I believe that it will make a lot of impact on ministries working. With all due regards to Ajay Shankar Saab, sir, I'm not so happy about the state of affairs in the government ministries' websites. I have been on the other side also. I think if we visit some other ministries of some other countries and see the data available to public, this far more granular and far more organized. I have been saying the grid operators, they're the people in India who are most conservative in releasing data in the public domain. And for God's sake, please release more data. Let the researchers work with now AI and all, and they will serve the nation better. So what is the harm in releasing data? Nothing is going to happen if you release it after a month of the grid operations and all. It will help us. So the TERI can do 2 things. First, in every chapter, pick up one topic, do some analysis, and it will serve a lot of purpose for policy advocacy. And second, as I say, bring out the gaps which you find in the public domain so that ministries can be requested and asked. And so, thank you very much for this in this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok ji, for these excellent suggestions. If I can recount for the benefit of others, the 4 things which you have said, one was about inclusion of the large hydro data, which was missing. Second, in RE, of course, yeah, in the RE chapter. And then the second, the energy consumption data regarding segments and the fuels, which could be added. And then two innovative suggestions about focusing on one critical area on which we can do some analytical thinking in the relevant chapter, and suggesting some future areas of work, data gathering or data capturing for the government and other stakeholders. So thank you for very constructive suggestions as far as the data gaps are concerned. But let me now move to Mr. Jayansina. So how do you see these data gaps, the current structure of TEDI, its content, and how you see some kind of improvement?
First of all, the treatise that has been put forward, TEDI, in this area is excellent. Whatever I could scan in a limited period of time, and there's a wealth of data here in store. Certain things, the data gaps that we are talking about is because of the very nature of certain data, because it is very difficult. For example, when we are talking about emission reduction, we are talking about not just scope 1, scope 2, but also scope 3. And scope 3 is more related to how the energy is being utilized by the last chain, those stakeholders. So definitely these are, but there are solutions also which I'm going to put forward to. And another thing is that even when we are talking about electricity demand, as sir you have rightly mentioned, energy efficiency and demand side management. Now demand side management is something that again it will require some initiatives, something like metering, how we are going to do the metering. And we are also in the electricity sector, typically that has been the bane of energy accounting. Since when I was in NTPC, I used to do a lot of in this energy audit and all those things. Now with the help of metering and with better tools available in meter data management, we are getting closer and bridging those gaps. But yes, so some way or the other, the technology is definitely coming into the picture. We have this data validation, that is also very important. So whenever we are talking about, we cannot just leave it to the data collectors. They also need technology enablement as well. And now there are plethora of technologies which are available, but proper selection of right technologies is important here. We have already started implementing AI enabled tools to complete those data which is incomplete. It is now possible to do the data modeling. However, I'm not saying that it can be completely accurate, but yes, it should be a combination of not just the format of data, but what kind of data we have to actually acquire, and also implementing the right tools. AI is one of them. Also very judiciously, because it will come at a price. We are talking about metering, then metering has to be pervasive, so that we keep an account of it. One of the things that has been done very well by the Ministry of Power is that segregation of the agricultural feeders, so that we have got better accounting of how much is actually being consumed in the agricultural sector. Simply the boundary meters, which are important to know how much energy is going where, so that we have a complete energy audit. And third thing is the carbon calculation, which I have just told you about, all the three: scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 is difficult, but it is doable. And we have to ensure that how we can implement the right technology and also the right frame of mind to implement those. And so we have to invite industries as well. Industry, academia, and nexus would be one good example of how we can deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanji. But just to come back to you on this question of scope 3 data, which you have referred to, do you think it's really possible for an organization like TERI, which publishes macro level data, to really go into that kind of detail?
Sir, actually, industries are already started doing that, because whenever in many such prestigious large contracts, it is important that we have to provide a certificate of not just the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. The entire supply chain have to be accounted for. So it is very difficult. I know that. So it is not very accurate. But the thing is that there are efforts which are on, and definitely, we have software tools available. We have to do the modeling. Forecasting is another thing by through the data which comes from the primary research and all those things, and of course technology enablement.
Okay. Thank you. I also taken note of the other suggestion about data which is relevant from energy audit point of view. So which could perhaps be captured. Mr. Venugopal Mutkur from the Niti Aayog, he brings not only energy but sustainability dimension also into the discussion. So what is your view about the current state of data that is presented, and how do you see the gaps or possible areas of improvement?
Yeah. So I think firstly, I want to congratulate TERI for releasing the recent and most updated version of TERI. In terms of my remarks, I'll just put it in two categories. One, probably the theme of this conference, the reliability of data that we have been referring or alluding to. And the second, where you're actually also talking about the completeness of the data or data gaps that we are talking about. So I'll put what are the efforts by Niti Aayog, and Alok sir was part of the chairing the EDM as well. What are the efforts taken by the government in these two theme areas? One, in terms of the reliability of data, and second, on the completeness of data. Then I'm going to end up with two asks for TERI in terms of what, its recommendations, especially because most of you, when the time, maybe I'll start with the asks now because it's important, that most of the data, if you look at, is available at the national level. But now most of the data at the state level is limited to electricity, right? So you can understand from the state's point of view what is the electricity share of each state and then accumulating at the country level. But what is the primary energy mix at each state level? Now, if I want to understand, there is no such data today which talks about primary energy mix at the state level. So my first ask to TERI, so I'm going to start with the asks first, is if it can do, maybe for the initial few years, start with few big states, and then probably increase the outreach to all the states in the country. So if you can do, a primary energy computation historically as well, or maybe for the latest year, that would be really helpful, not just for the policymakers at the national level, but also state level as well. Because most of the states have now been increasingly announcing the targets of, achieving net zero or energy transition at the state level. So it's important for them to understand what is my energy mix today, apart from electricity, where there's a lot of data. But what happens outside electricity? Because electricity, if you understand, is only 19% of our energy demand. The rest of the demand is filled by other sources. So this is my first ask to TERI. The second ask that I have for TERI is that we have been often reliant upon international publications, which Alok sir has been alluding to as well, is that we have good publications like from TERI, we have publications from Niti Aayog itself, we have publications from CEA on many of these challenging policy questions. So it's important within this forum to promote Indian projections or Indian assumptions, primarily because they're aligned to the visions and aspirations of the country. So I'll take an example. If you take out IEA has come up with World Energy Outlook in 2021. And when they talk about India's economic aspirations, they do not take into account our aspirations of being a developed economy by 2047. As a result, they underestimate our energy demand by so much, because we understand, being a low per capita energy country, we are very closely, per capita energy and per capita income are very closely related, especially at a lower level. Now, as a result of these underestimations, our energy demand is underestimated, our investment requirements are underestimated, and our emissions, again, God knows what happens to those numbers as well. So it's important that, forums like TERI should push forth adopting national publications coming in from either within the think tank activity within India or NITI or power or other interministerial activities. These are my two asks. So let me come back to the first point that I want to make. What has been government doing in the sphere of improving the reliability of data? First, in terms of reliability of data, if you have seen energy statistics 2022 of MOSPI, there have been subtle changes that have happened. One change that you would have probably seen is that the gross calorific value computation, which earlier used to happen based on IES numbers, have been changed and computed based on national calorific values. As a result, they actually show that our primary energy demand is actually lower than what they conventionally put across. So this, the push from NITI and from Alok sir's intervention, we have re-estimated, re-looked at our entire computation by having India-specific conversion values for calorific value of coal. Second issue that I want to mention, if you have seen in the energy statistics, typically much before 2022, when they talk about petrol consumption, they all club it under the category of retailers and resellers and not showing into the transport category. As a result, the transport demand of course is shown at a lower level because the demand is in other categories for petrol and diesel. Now with the intervention, we have said there's a survey by petrol, because at the end of the day, as this basically connects to what Alok sir was hinting at, we do not have data linking sector and fuel, right? There's a survey that is done by Petroleum Planning Analysis Cell across the country, which basically gives a rough hand calculations based on which they divide these petrol consumption into sectors, into fuels. So that's another change that you would probably have seen in the MOSPI's numbers. Third thing that probably what TEDI also has probably missed out is that while they replicate the energy balance of MOSPI, is that MOSPI does not take into account the complete bioenergy, right? The traditional biomass, which goes into the cooking sector today, which is very high even in the rural sector today. If you look at the NFHS stats, this has been not been accounted in the MOSPI's energy statistics, because what MOSPI accounts is conventionally what Ministry of Power publishes, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, which is the conventional holder of the bioenergy, doesn't publish data on the bioenergy, especially the biomass consumption. So we need to have some kind of computation about how much is the bioenergy. So we did a small exercise in NITI and it is close to around 100 MTOE or 90 to 100 MTOE. So when you actually include the complete bioenergy in the fossil mix, in the entire primary energy mix, so the fossil share is around 84% and non-fossil is 16%. So it's important as a think tank, it is important to, first bring out these issues where there are data gaps, and then, take recommendations and take measures to how to improve this quality of data. So let me end up with one particular intervention, because, there is a lot of work that on the data gaps. These are done with the NITI, will help the think tanks like TERI. The data gaps have been identified at demand sector level and supply sector level. These reports are available in the public domain. So we need not reinvent the wheel in terms of understanding where the data gaps are, but pick up from where they are and see what is the current status of knowledge in terms of having this data, and then see how best we can fill these data gaps. Last, to fill in, some of these data points, probably like something like critical minerals, right? It's going to be very important, but today we do not have understanding about, we talk about capacities, but we do not have understanding about how these capacities will loosely translate into mineral requirements. And what happens to these mineral requirements? Do we need to import? Do we have sufficient capacities? So these are some of the questions I think I would recommend TERI to dissect in their chapter-wise analysis in the future coming forward. And it will be interesting for the policymakers, because these are the questions that we are grappling with. So let me end it here and give back to you, Rashmi.
Thank you, Venu. You have already touched upon some of the points that I would have come back to you in the third part of our discussion in any case. But you have, again, you have touched some very important issues about the completeness and reliability of data, and not reinventing the wheel, because a lot of data is available. So I'm sure our researchers do take that into account. The second issue was about, which you have endorsed what Mr. Alok Kumar has said about the breakdown of the energy consumption data by segments, which enhances the quality of the data. And then bioenergy and critical minerals, which you have mentioned, I'm sure we will take that into account in future. So to come back to you, sir, I mean, we have listened to the panelists about the kind of data gaps that they think we should address. And now our researchers do make a very strenuous effort in trying to gather the data from different sources and as authentic as possible. And then the multiplicity of data sources is also growing. Considering this fact that the availability of data sources and the data and the sources has multiplied, the ministries also publish their own data. Different organizations now publish data. So how do we reconcile this, and how do we cover this data gap? So while we improve the quality of data in TERI, how do we try to make sure that the data is reconciled with the available data and also is as authentic as possible? And of course, meets the demand of the different stakeholders.
Well, on the question of authenticity, I think the default assumption is that when it is from a government source, it should be taken as authentic unless demonstrated otherwise. I think that is the first issue that we need to keep in mind. However, there may be discrepancies between data from different public sources. And in that case, we need to actually undertake some detailed probing into what the sources of this divergence are. These sources of divergence may be, may be definitional. Maybe that there's a variation in the primary sources from which the data is sourced. So this has to be investigated, and I don't think any hard and fast rules can be set out. Now, how do we deal with the multiplicity of data? And indeed, I mean, it is very easy to get swamped by data. So I think we have to be selective. We have to choose data fields which most cater to the needs of researchers and policymakers, be somewhat selective so that we don't try to be as comprehensive as possible, but we try to be as relevant as possible to our users. So this will involve, of course, a conscious choice based on feedback from researchers and policymakers on what data fields are the most useful to them and in what form are they the most useful to them. So I think that is all that I would like to say on this point. Thank you.
I mean, as they say, the perfect is always the enemy of the good. So you have to make a choice. You have to be selective, but of course relevant. So, Mr. Alok Kumar, how do you see this multiplicity of data and how it could affect?
Yes, thank you. I entirely agree what Pradipto Ghosh Sahab is saying. There are some, you have to see the nature of data. If it is primary data like energy or in terms of electricity supplied or generated, you can't dispute it is one source which is coming from the NLDC and RLDC and CA. So that has to be taken. So whatever the primary source and most authentic should be the starting point. And you should also see that whether it is a derived data or some analyze or some inference or some sample basis, that I think TERI can very well look out. So one should go to the basic source, and which is the, I say that this is census versus sample. You should see the data which is comprehensive, which is coming from, which is adding up and which is including all dimensions, should be taken. On second point, also I agree with Ghosh Sahab that too much data is available. If you read, again I'll repeat, if you read the morning newspaper and the WhatsApp group reports, there's so much of reports and data if you see, and then they have their own dimensions. TERI will do well to figure out what is your problem statement or what are you trying to do. So don't end up in just compiling everything on the earth, because by the time you compile, it is already dated. So it is well that if you maybe publication may be thinner, but you figure out what is your objective. Like in power sector, I can speak. What is important is the fuel wise, how the trend is changing is one important thing. Second important thing is the efficiency of conversion, maybe from the fuel to generation and then transmission losses, distribution losses. Third important aspect is the distribution viability. There are very established parameters by now in the ratings and audited statements. So if you look at some other reports or ICRA and all, before the audited figures have become available, they are not relevant. You must look at the report which PFC brings out after the basis of the accounts which have been audited, because there has been a lot of gap between discoms in the audited accounts and unaudited. Fortunately, now the gap has now narrowed down. Earlier, it used to be 3-4 years old accounts. Now, I think they are very concurrent. For the financial closes in the next 9 months, they have to produce a report, otherwise they lose government grant. So look at the data, on what document, what basis the data has been generated. Like the system generation, meter generation, you can't really say contradict. Audited accounts or the grid operated data, and those can be looked into, and also see what Mr. Ghosh was saying, the definitional issues. For example, again, I'll repeat the renewable energy. 4 or 5 years ago, India also used to report renewable energy without large hydro, but now we have aligned. So in our NDCs also, we have now started reporting large hydro. So you have to see that there may be some data points, because they are moving into some old definition, as maybe TERI is doing presently, but now the current definition. If you reconcile those aspects and look at the data which is from the original source, which is more of a comprehensive data. And third point I've made is what is your need, what are the dimensions you are going to examine. Don't put all government schemes and all, because these are all available in various websites and all. Make it too sharp, maybe it's thin, and it will do. One thing I would like to add before I hand over to Rashmi ji. I am not aware whether TERI will have all the resources and time required to produce such a publication, because you are also devoted to a lot of analysis, a lot of things I am aware. It will be worthwhile to explore whether you can have 1 or 2 partners to do this, who are also into this field, who are doing more dedicatedly. So over the year, I think if you have 1 or 2 partners for this publication, come out with much sharper and much thorough, then that is one suggestion I will leave with TERI. You can explore whether you want to go solo or you want to do partnership. Doing partnership will also be worth it if you, every institution has its own resource focus and resource allocation. So you may not be having everything for producing a much better, maybe much improved report, but this publication is good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alokji. Thank you very much. Mr. Sinha, same questions, but I'd also like you to address the different chapters which are covered in the different subject, considering the data that we have to capture for those sectors and the different sources. Also keeping the requirements of different ministries in mind. How would you see further improvements in TERI?
To begin with, we rely on TERI data all the time. Actually, we have been subscribing to TERI, and we also, trust the process. There may be a few gaps, but that is essentially, we also have a lot of market research reports also. What is important here is that whenever you are using data, you have to apply filters. Filters in the sense that in the market research reports, it depends upon what is the nature of and motive of that research. Who is sponsoring that research? That also will complicate issues for you if you have a certain objective and that is going totally in a different direction. So So the intention of the data is also very important, and we definitely take that into account. I think sir has also mentioned about whatever data. I'm very happy to announce this thing that that Power Grid, have really matured in terms of the data excellence. Because I heard you saying about National Load Dispatch Center and the State Load Dispatch Center, where they are getting the data in the real time. So the real time, the contemporary data is very important, because if the data becomes old, whatever research you are doing and whatever interpretation, it may have become obsolete. So how you check that the data has not become obsolescence and it is relevant? So relevant, I think you mentioned about Mr. Venugopal. So I think it is validating my assertion here. The amount of data that we are getting is now more and more real time, and I can tell you, because I have seen what NTPC is doing and what PFC and how data is acquired by Power Grid also, where they are employing more and more, relying on sensors for the real time data. They are having tools for real time data visualization and analytics, so you can actually vouch for the authenticity of the data. Another thing which I will tell you, that there are a lot of primary data, which is good, very authentic research which TERI is doing. There are also a lot of secondary data as well. There has to be some kind of your discriminatory lens that has to be applied to ensure that the data is presented, and that is the data. So again, just like we have got tools for knowing that certain things have been plagiarized. So in the same way, we have tools which can through the historical analysis, it can be discovered that it is right or wrong, and how much of a margin of error is there through artificial intelligence. So these are some of the things. We do it with the help of all, and then also industry partnership, academic partnership is very important. We hire interns for this very purpose from noted educational and research institutions, because they don't have any motive. They have to, that is a partial fulfillment for their degree requirement. So whatever we tell them, that they take it very seriously. They don't have any strings attached. They don't have any past baggage. So, and we only have to guide them. So these are some of the things, which I feel that is very important. Industry academia nexus, we always have been promoting, so that we can overcome these issues of the data gaps. Thank you.
Thank you. So two things which you said. One is the use of or application of proper data filters, and keeping the data as contemporary as possible, for which you have to go to the right source. Venu, what are your thoughts about this?
I think one most important thing as we speak about data is that most important thing is that we do have a standardized data definition, right? So primarily because I'll take an example to explain what I mean. That when you talk about general import dependency, a single ministry can talk about it from the perspective of supply side. The other ministry can talk it from the perspective of demand side. So you'll probably end up with two different numbers talking about import dependency for the same particular fuel type. So it is important for user to understand what is typically the international benchmark when they talk about a particular data. Do they report it on the supply side always? If so, then report it according to the international benchmarks. So I think that is the first most and important thing, is to align with the standardized definitions with the international benchmarks. And second is, how is the data arithmetic being performed? I'll take a simple example. When you've actually shown it in the TEDI, you've showed the electricity generation and electricity capacity of utility only, right? Primarily of grid. But when you actually showed the per capita electricity consumption figures, primarily coming in from CA, they actually add captive generation and then they can compute the total per capita electricity consumption. So it is, if you look at just the generation and then divided by the population, you would not get the figure that is shown on the TEDI slide. So you would see that the data arithmetic that is being performed there is that they add the captive generation as well. So it is important to understand whenever certain particular measure is being reported, what data arithmetic is being performed. In that data arithmetic, like for example, India doesn't have a latest census, right? It's only 2011. So if you look at what are the population estimates, so population estimates, if you look at what is the government source, There's only one source of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which has computations till 2036. There is no other ministry which has the population projections. Most of them are assumptions based on some international UN reference or some other sources. So where is this population number being coming in from? So reiterating to what Alok is saying, that data sources from authentic government sources and trying to understand how this data arithmetic is performed, and then aligning it with the data dictionaries or the data definitions that are internationally been computed. I also want to reiterate what Alok has said is that a lot of this information is being in the public domain. So rather than TERI undertaking this massive exercise of coming up with this huge volume every year, there is already an exercise by Niti Aayog in the form of India Climate Energy Dashboard. So it's a climate plus energy now. A lot of this information from the different ministries have been aggregated and put on a single platform. If TERI can actually bring out analytical pieces, that what Alok sir was hinting at, I would want to second that, can bring out analytical thought processes and analytic viewpoints, then using how different policies of the governments have been performing, using different metrics to analyze, using the data coming in from these rich data sources, how different policies of the governments have been performing, and then provide feedback to the policymakers. I think that will be really an important thing going forward. Let me just stop here and give it back to you, Rashmi.
I think what Mr. Sinha was pointing out, that use of appropriate data filters. While you may have a NITI data on energy and climate, the question is of presenting it to the public from a particular point of view. I mean, sustainability is our objective, for example. So TEDI, the objective is to present the useful data that is available in the public domain from different sources to cater to specific requirements. So what kind of sources, filters, and objectives have to be kept in mind there. So of course, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but that data can be relied upon to present the data in a particular light. Thank you very much. Now I come back to the last question, which I had raised in the beginning, that considering the kind of data that we present and the data sources that we have, and then the function that TEDI has been performing over the years. Now, some of the panelists have presented some new ideas that, of course, Mr. Ajay Shankar was saying that we need to look at some analytical and the TEDI from angle. Data has to be analyzed, and some of the important areas for future innovations in this field have been pointed out by the analysts. So let me begin with you, sir, again. We present the data on energy supply, energy consumption, and some environmental domain. So you think this is enough, or we need to, and then the kind of analytical pieces that we are looking for to improve the quality of TEDI? You think we should look at some other areas, or within this structure itself we can do something more?
Well, of course, the inclusion of data fields really depends upon the interests of the users. I mean, and they are primarily researchers, as well as policymakers, as well as business. I mean, in my last remarks, I missed out business. And I think we've got some feedback now, which will enable us to undertake this exercise of pruning, of adding data fields, of putting them in a form which is more usable by the users. Now, I think roughly the same approach goes for the analytical pieces. You have a large data set. Now, obviously, you can think of many different ways you can skin that particular cat. But which are the ones which are relevant to the stakeholders? But here I would also add that when we do the analytical pieces, we have to present them in a form in which a layperson would be able to grasp the data, grasp the significance of the analysis at a at a, very easily, and which mainly means that we think of graphical and pictorial representations of the results of an analysis. Now, one area which I would like to suggest that it maybe sort of span different themes is that in respect of each sectoral area, whether supply side or demand side, we identify a list of emerging technologies and try and project what the state of these technologies would be in 5, 10, 20 years, along with the cost thereof. Because this, I mean, of course, no analysis is infallible. I mean, these are would always be in the nature of educated cases. But for example, what do we see are the costs of energy storage? How would they change, over a period of 20 years? How would the costs of green hydrogen change over a period of 20 years? These are, what would be the state of commercialization? What would there be the technical performance? I think these are, again, that with respect to every sector, most users would find that this is of interest to them. Also, it would enable researchers to appropriately include these emerging technologies in their forecasting models, forecasting and policy analytical models. Right. So that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This is extremely useful. So in the energy supply side, we can include these elements of analysis on energy storage, green hydrogen, and of course, Mr. Sinha was also pointing to the modeling use of artificial intelligence tools and modeling. Some of that exercise can also be done in this regard. So, Alokji, coming back to you, you have already suggested one area for analysis, the impact of free power on, I think you said, impact of free power on energy consumption. So, besides this, is there any other area of analysis which you would suggest?
Really, let me put it in perspective. We can all come and give you 100 suggestions. It is very easy to give suggestions, but when you implement, it's very difficult. So we will not like to anyway diminish or diminute the importance of what you are doing. It's a very important compilation and very beautifully titled as the Data Diary and Yearbook. So it's available with you. You can just open it and refer to it. So it's very important thing. Just very few suggestions, 2 suggestions. If you want to make it more useful, you must start with who are the target users. Whether these are the students in the engineering colleges or research institutions or corporates or somebody in Niti Aayog or ministry. You start with the user. Once you see you have figure out 2 or 3 user domains, then you can make them more useful. What they're looking for. I've got 2, 3 examples to say. Like, I was trying to write something and trying to find what is we are talking of affordability of the energy transition for India. I think it's a very big issue which we have been saying. I was trying to find what is the percentage of household expenditure on energy in various countries or various states. Believe me, I could not find it very easily. I took the help of somebody, my old colleague, and he talked to somebody in IEA. They were also not having it somewhere in their front page of website. They dug it out and they give it to me. So something, example, like for our policy advocacy in India, something like what an Indian household a poor household or a low-income household is spending on energy monthly or yearly is a very important data point. If we can take it out and derive it, TERI can also derive it. It is available in somewhere. Like climate funding, we have conferences and books over books and all. What Government of India is spending on supporting energy transition, it is scattered all over the ministry. It is not available at one place. If TERI can come out with an annual finding that in what direction are we moving, how much we are spending on giving tariff subsidies or energy subsidies, and how much we are spending on supporting transition in terms of viability gap funding or technological assistance, and a trend. So there are certain 2-3 things. If you say make your flagship outcome in the report, apart from the compilation, which is itself is very useful, then I think its utility and usefulness of the publication for the users will go up. One more example before I end. I read, you must also notice something like called Crystal Thali. You must have seen the newspapers. The veg thali and non-veg thali, how its cost is moving month to month. It is published, sir. It is published, and I read it with a lot of interest. So I say something you similarly, TERI can come out with maybe 10 or 12 things, derived things, which will be useful for Indian bureaucrats and Indian delegates and Indian policymakers to make their point in international forum that we are spending so much of our budget or GDP on the supporting climate, and this has gone up like this. So you come and see data instead of just plain English and arguing. I think this publication will be more useful. That's what my humble suggestions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of it, of course, is very appropriate for a research paper for Mr. Saxena or somebody. Mr. Sinha, your thoughts on the kind of analytical elements which should go into TERI?
Yeah. So regarding this data analytics and all these, we actually, I will tell you from my experience, we always, whenever we have to work on any project which requires a lot of data-driven analysis, we go by framework. For us, framework has to be defined. What are the data which is absolutely necessary? What are the data which is not required? I will just give you an example. When under integrated power development scheme, when this GIS-based consumer indexing and network mapping was done, then at that point of time, Ministry of Power had come with a template at what data you have to actually acquire in terms of, so that we can analyze how many numbers of people are there in the household, what is their average energy consumption, what type of meters they have, how they are connected. So all those things, a lot of data is there. So it was a template which decides the quality of your data, and that is decided by the framework that you provide. Earlier, what was happening is then when a lot of field work was done, so many of data used to come. So we had to do something. A lot of data sanitization have to be done. Data sanitization still is done because ultimately that data has to be loaded into ERP systems. And now we also have another tool, which is the data mining tools which are available. And we do because even if the primary data, it can be wrong because of several reasons, because ultimately it's a human led interventions where there could be honest errors as well, and sometimes it could be somebody maybe making conjectures and all those things which has no place for right decisions to be made. So data mining, of course, that is something which is important. Again, it has to be fit into that kind of the way we do the data modeling and analysis using the data mining techniques. So these are some of these technology level interventions. Now data mining uses a lot of artificial intelligence as well. We have a robotic process automation, chatbots, which will, even at a data entry level, they will do the validations. because that is important. And when I was involved in the RAP-DRP projects, we used to have that template which was given to us by PFC, and those templates we had built some inbuilt validations so that we know if the person who is collecting the data is putting the wrong data, then it will tell you immediately that this data is wrong. Because obviously, if you are going to a household where you know that there is a 3 kilowatt or 5 kilowatt average sanction load, he is putting 50. It will immediately let you know that, look. So these are some of the ways by which we do data validation is very important. In energy metering, there is one important concept of validation, estimation, and editing. Earlier, VEE used to be done in Excel, but now it is being done again using tools with artificial intelligence and all those things. Earlier, when I was in NTPC, sir, we used to do heat rate calculations. We used to do so at that time we used to do simple in Excel, and we used to come out with the right answers. Now we can do it much faster because we have got tools where we don't even have to fill in. The data will be acquired by the sensors. So there are flow sensors, there are pressure sensors, temperature sensors. There are and they will collect the data. You have data collector, and then you will process the data, and you'll have all the answers. But still, there has to be a man behind it, and that is very important as well. And this is how we do it. So framework is very, very important. If project has to be delivered, that also has to be delivered in a framework. What will be the framework? So we collect the data data is collected at source, and the right data is also collected at the source, so that rest everything becomes streamlined. Sir, thank you.
Thank you. Venu?
Yeah. So I just want to emphasize 2 points. One, we all understand that we are moving from biennial update reports to biennial transparency reports. So we are no longer going to be reporting only on the mitigation, but there will be onus on reporting, adaptation on other parameters in the climate as well. In that context, I think this book's utility will be of higher value tomorrow, because it's not just going to be energy, right? The BTR, we're going to talk about other aspects of the climate management. We're going to talk about adaptation. We're going to talk about loss and damage. We're going to talk about those interesting aspects, which I think this book going to serve as an important purpose in the coming days. The second point that I want to emphasize, that TERI is a unique institution where there are cross-disciplinary experts, multidisciplinary experts at a single umbrella of TERI. So I think TERI can come up with analytical issues focusing on the intersectionality of multiple of these issues. For example, I'll take the example what was presented. So we have an expert from agriculture talking about how agriculture crop area was everything was changing. We had experts from water talking about how water demand in the future is changing. We had experts from energy and agriculture sector, how it's changing. Now, and also on the ethanol side, right? Now, for us as a policymakers, it's very important to understand, like, if I want to shift today from a sugarcane based water intensive crops to alternative crops, what is going to be the impact on water? What is going to be the impact on, if I'm shifting from sugarcane to, let's say, maize, does it impact my food security? Does it impact my water security? So all these, I think TERI is uniquely positioned to address these issues of intersectionality. And, I think if you look at just the intersectionality, you will generate as many unique ideas. I know probably we at this forum will not be able to generate. So let me just stop there and give it back to you, Rashmiji.
Thank you, Venu. That brings us to the end of the discussion today, this panel. It's an extremely enriching discussion. We have covered a number of issues, the kind of the format of the TERI, the sources of the data, the kind of improvements in the data gaps, and future areas of improvement in terms of an analysis of the data. I do not intend to summarize because it's at the moment beyond me. I'm sure my colleagues have been patiently listening and taking note of the suggestions which have been carefully made by the panelists. But broadly, what I sense is that TERI is currently doing a very useful work. The data is looked forward to by many of the users. And then government is one of the important users of this data, despite the fact that the government itself has a very large number of data, but the data being collected and presented in a particular manner has its own use. and ready for use, ready for analysis. That's why analysis becomes important. Some of the possible areas where we can bring about improvement in the quality and usefulness of the report have been pointed out. Areas of and an intersectional analysis is clearly one area. Agriculture, environment, energy, climate. There are a number of issues where we overlap. The issues are overlapping in nature, and that is where some more analysis is needed. Current data may not be adequate for that. We may have to capture some additional data, and additionality of the data has also been pointed out by the panelists. And particularly in the energy segment, that is quite obvious. In the climate area also, it's very obvious. Adaptation, loss and damage, this kind of data has not been captured. But I think it needs some extra effort. And whether we need to take on a partner for this, as Mr. Alok Kumar has suggested, that's for us to consider. But the most important thing, immediate challenge before us, as Ajay Shankar Saab was pointing out, that we are going to bring it out in a different format. Monthly updation of the data. So that itself is a huge challenge. The existing data itself has to be updated and made available on stream. So that itself is a challenge. In addition, we have to capture the data gaps that have come out in today's discussion, and the future areas of analysis, which would improve the quality and usefulness of the report. So let me thank all the seniors and the panelists who are present today, and to you for patiently listening to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sirs, for the interesting, insightful, and interactive session. With this, we do come to the end of the session, but I would like to take a moment to express our gratitude. First and foremost, I express my sincere thanks to our esteemed dignitaries for gracing us with their presence and valuable insights. Your wisdom and expertise has enriched this occasion immensely. Let's give a big round of applause to thank them for their presence. I also extend my thanks to all the distinguished guests in the audience, colleagues and media who have taken the time to join us to make the event more special. Your presence has made this gathering all the more meaningful. To all of you present here, thank you for being such a receptive audience. Your interactive participation in the interactive session will undoubtedly enrich the experience further. I wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Vibhadavan, Director General TERI, Mr. Ajay Shankar, Mr. R.R. Reshmi, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh, Dr. A.K. Saxena, and Dr. Dipankar Saharia for their guidance, intellectual inputs, and for providing encouragement at every point of time, and all my dear colleagues in the organization of this event. I take this opportunity to thank and deeply appreciate the enthusiasm and commitment of the TEDI team, chapter authors, reviewers, from research divisions across TERI, Knowledge Resource Center, Communications and Publications team, Administrative Services team, for their immense contribution to publishing TEDI 22-23. At the end, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are most grateful to you all, and thank you for being with us this evening. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you very much. And on behalf of TERI, please accept this gift as a token of our appreciation, sir. It was a pleasure to have you with us today. Please continue. Once again, thanks again. Now I would request you to join tea, which is served outside. Thank you very much for this.